to the UIAAA Connection podcast. GoFan and VNN are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection. Now a combined company, GoFan and VNN provide a seamless integration for digital ticketing and athletic websites. Direct your fans to one place for all your athletic events, communications, and tickets to home and away games. Thank you to GoFan and VNN for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Dave Hood, Certified Master Athletic Administrator and the Executive Director of the Oregon Athletic Directors Association. Hoodie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our audience where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, those types of things.
Grew up here in Oregon, actually. I was born in Portland. We moved to Bend in Central Oregon, right in the geographic heart of the state in 1966. And so I've been here off and on ever since. Graduated from high school. We had a one high school town. We now have 5 high schools in this town. So we've seen this has been one of the most rapidly growing areas of the country. But I left here and went to University of Portland. I was hoping to play football at University of Portland, and they eliminated the football program there. So I was there for a year and then went to University of Oregon, and I ended up with my bachelor's and my master's and my admin license all from University of Oregon. Thought originally that I wanted to go into medicine or physical therapy, dentistry, one of those, and switched paths midway through and really reconnected with one of my mentors who I was fortunate enough to be able to teach with before he retired. A phenomenal gentleman who now lives back in the East Coast. But that's the reason I got into education and got into coaching and working with kids. Really was the spark that was provided by him.
Let me ask you a question not related to the ones I sent you to show my ignorance of Oregon geography. How close is Bend to Sun River, where you have your conference?
It is about 10 or 15 minutes away. Sun River's just slightly to our south. So that's where our membership likes to go for the conference. It's a phenomenal little resort town, very expensive, but it is to die for. People that have been there will want to come back year after year. Most of the population in Oregon is on the west side of the Cascade Mountains. I'd say probably 90% of the population. And so we are on the east side. We're in the high desert. So the climate is completely different. We're at about 3,600 feet here. Sagebrush and junipers. We're at the edge. Really Sisters, Oregon and Bend, Oregon are kind of at the edge of the desert. So we're transitioning from the trees to the sagebrush to the east. So Oregon is big, as you know, and most of the population, most of the schools and whatnot are on the west side.
Well, and let me ask you another nonsense question, because we call it Oregon because we're from the west, but can you tell foreigners when they come in, when they call it Oregon? Does that just drive you crazy, or do the people care?
I don't know. We have our little area here has an influx of so many people from out of the area that have moved here. So we don't, it used to kind of be annoying. Now it's like, yeah, you can tell they're not from around here. So yeah.
That's good. Let's have you expand. You talked about one of your mentors just a minute ago. Talk more about some mentors you had, maybe that person and some others that have made a difference as you grew up and professionally.
Yeah, well, certainly as I moved up through the ranks, I coached a variety of sports and then got into administration and athletic administration. One of my first mentors was Bill Bowers, who was our first executive director, and then Hud Edwards, who is in our Hall of Fame. And Hud, when I began to look at athletic administration, he was actually the AD at the high school I was coaching and teaching at. And he said, if you get into this, you need to hook up with your professional organizations. You need to become a member of the NIAAA. At that time, we weren't a dual member state. And he said, you need to give back. You need to attend and learn and always be growing. And I thought that was amazing. And then another one of my mentors who was our executive director who took over after Bill was Chris Welch, who's now with the Oregon School Activities Association. And Chris and I are still connected on a variety of levels, and great guy. And then we had two gentlemen that I actually recruited or had a hand in recruiting to take over when Chris was very hesitant to move from the OADA world and the athletic administration world to working for our state association. And so we assured him that we would continue the tradition that he and Bill had laid down. And so we recruited Terry Hansen and Craig Rothenberger, two guys that had a world of experience and different kinds of experiences. And so they ran the organization for a few years and then stepped aside, and the board asked me to take over. So yeah, those were some very influential people in my life. And then beyond that, what I've learned with the National Executive Director Council is we really have each other's backs. It's unbelievable to meet people such as yourself from Utah, Fred Balsamo from back east, and Roy Turner, and just some of the others, Mike Elson from across the country. And that's really been a boon to what we do here.
Let me ask you a little bit of a personal question here as we continue. What's the biggest failure or disappointment in your life, and what did you learn from it?
Wow. Well, I think, gosh, we've had a number of them. I don't know that I could point to one that's the biggest. The big thing though is attitude is everything. And so how you respond to things, how you come back from things, how you grow and learn, that's really significant. Yeah, I don't know that I could pin one. There's a number of things I wish I could do over. But yeah, you grow and you learn and develop, and I try not to focus very much on me. Everything I do is about serving others. Really, I don't have anything to offer. I don't know, this podcast or other ADs. I try to put together a group of people that are all the things that I'm not, and then I serve them. And that's really who our organization is. So, you got to work within what you are. I'm not a great storyteller. I don't know, when I was coaching, I was a good motivator. I don't know that I motivate our people now, but I really try to connect, especially our newer ADs, with mentors that will have meaning and be a guiding light for them.
That's well said. Let me ask you, since you first got in the world of being an AD decades ago, and now that you're an executive director, how has the job changed in your perspective?
Oh my gosh. It is completely, well, it's not completely different, but it's evolving, and it's evolving fast. I talked to one of our sponsors, one of our vendors yesterday, and we were remarking, and this person had a software company. And I said, when I first started, it was all shoulder pads and helmets and balls and nets and equipment. And now probably half of our sponsors and companies are folks who have put together software or registration systems or scheduling systems or communication systems. So that part is hugely different, and that can really make a difference and save you time. And then it also adds up. I see the stress on on athletic administrators who feel like they have to deal with a lot of these things and that are learning how to empower those systems to make their lives easier. But it does seem like we've dumped a lot on folks. And that's just one, people are still people. I think working with kids is still the greatest job ever. And I think that, I think kids have changed a little, but not necessarily a lot. I think parents, we spend more time educating parents and probably need to. And that's a good thing. But yeah, those are a few of the things that have changed.
No, absolutely. Let's have you follow up from earlier, and let me have you talk a little bit more about how you originally heard about when you first became an AD. Did someone from the Oregon Association reach out to you? I know you mentioned that your immediate boss told you about the NIAAA, but how did you get started? How did you come up through the OADA, and then obviously get involved in the NIAAA?
Yeah, so I served on our board. Well, first I was a league rep. We have a sort of a representative council from each league, and that acts as sort of our delegate assembly, and we make some decisions through that group. So I served our league through that. Then decided I thought it was a good idea to run for the board to give back. And again, that was my mentors that said, you need to serve, you need to give back, not just sit back and take. And so I ran for the board and was elected. And then in our board, you have a 5-year rotation all the way through past president. So I did that. And then I stayed on for 1 year as the retired AD. And then I was off, and I was trying to time it at about the time I was going to retire in 2018. And did. And that was about the time in 2019, our executive directors left. And so they asked me to come back. But yeah, I think that service piece is key. You get into it and then you're super busy and you got a lot of irons in the fire. But I always go by the saying, it's better to burn out than it is to rust. And here in Oregon, we got a lot of people that rust because it's rainy, but
That's good. I like that. So let me ask you what it's. Well, I consider them legends in Oregon. The people that I know. You mentioned them earlier: Billy Bowers, Chris Welch, Terry and Craig, Ron Richards, and I think I told you this. I think the very first Oregon strategic plan, Ron Richards called me up and actually invited me. Don't know why, but I came up there, and this was, my goodness, 10, 11, 12 years ago when we first got started. So talk about those individuals a little bit more, talk about maybe some stories with them, etc.
yeah, we've had some phenomenal people on our board, from Mike McGann, who really got into the LTCs. Barry Bookin served, and I could just go on. We've had, one of my closest friends, Tim Sam, who's currently on our board, is our LTI coordinator, has served as our OSA liaison. That's our state activity association. He continues to advise me. Gosh, yeah, Ron Richards, who served, and he was also an LTI coordinator. We've just had so many good ones. We have been fortunate to keep our historical perspective, and I don't ever want to lose that. We've had Bill Bowers until just this year was our retired AD, and we kept him around because he's forgotten more than most of us will ever know about this organization. And I remember when he and Ron Richards brought you up, and I think you met at the Sheraton there by the airport. And
Yep, exactly right.
An intensive weekend of building our first ever strategic plan, which we've gone through and surprisingly checked off a lot of boxes there. We rebuilt that 2 years ago, and we brought Bill Bowers back to head that effort. And so we now are operating off of our second strategic plan. So it's kind of ironic. I'm going to go here in 2 weeks to Indianapolis and work on the NIAAA's 6th strategic plan. I'm kind of excited about that. It's a looks like an intensive group, and it'll be an interesting weekend to see what we come up with.
That'll be such a blessing for you. If I remember right, I think Tim Sam was one of the fellows that was there when I came up with the original Oregon plan.
Yeah.
But I was going to ask you, so which of the committees are you on in this upcoming NIAAA plan? Are you programs? Are you operations? Or are you finance?
Well, I figured I'd be finance because that's kind of in my wheelhouse, but I don't know if it was Len S. or Josh Scott got me on programs, so I'll be on programs. So that'll be fun too. It'd be fun to see how that goes.
Well, I was fortunate enough. So the fourth plan, so this is what, 10 years ago, they asked me to be one of the operations chair, which I gladly accepted that. But there's me, and then there's a person from each section. And the crazy thing is now, looking all these years later, I had Mike Elson, who was not the executive director in Tennessee 10 years ago. I had Tracy Linen, who was not the executive director in Idaho 10, 11 years ago, and Hugh McReynolds, who was not the executive director in Kentucky, and Everett Kellapolo, who was not the executive director in Utah. And all four of those now, just by happenstance, are now executive directors in their state associations. And it's just, you'll find this out. It's just such a blessing to sit around the table and to hear ideas and to bounce ideas off and to see where you can go and then deal with those other people's on the other committees. So I didn't know that. So kudos for you for getting involved in that. You'll love that. Let's talk for a minute.
Forward to it.
Oh, okay. Let's talk for a minute about the NEDC, the National Executive Directors Council. You mentioned that earlier when you took over, I think probably 5 years ago. Obviously, that's how we got to know each other.
Yep.
But talk about the NEDC, talk about the organization, and talk about what a great thing it's been for the NIAAA, but more importantly, for every state association because of the camaraderie and the sharing that goes on there.
That's just exactly what it is. It's, my first national athletic director conference was in San Diego, and I went and sat there. I think it was 2008. And I sat there and I could not believe that people from around the country were experiencing and had the same issues that I did. You're in a workshop, you're in a roundtable discussion, and that was extremely enlightening. The same experience I had when I went to my first NEDC in Canton, Ohio. I mean, we're dealing with the same issues in the States. And so when I took over in 2019, financially, we were way down. And so I really was hunting and pecking for bits of advice and how you run things from all of you all. And that was a huge thing for me, that connection, the sharing of ideas. And then beyond that is the connections to some of our speakers. Mark Hott has done a phenomenal job bringing in sponsorships. And so using those connections has really helped us here at the OADA get on a little better foot financially. But the other speakers in all of the various states that we've attended are just phenomenal, and being able to tap into those resources is great. But I mean, the bottom line is, what are you doing in Connecticut? What are you doing in Nebraska? What are you doing in Utah or Illinois or California? That's just, it's huge. Oh, and I wanted to mention also, speaking of the NEDC, I met my brother Dave Ticker up there, and Dave has been a huge influence and a huge advisor and mentor for me. And I just wanted to mention that. Met him through the NEDC, but continue to connect with him. And he's kind of like you. He's retiring this year and passing the torch, but I still stay connected to him and Scott Nordy up there. Just the advice you get from different people who've been through many things that you haven't is critical.
Absolutely. I remember, I think Tick first came on 2000, 6 or 7. I think it was when the first time we went to New York and Saratoga. That's the first time I'd met him, and I reached out to him there. But boy, what a great personality! What a great leader! And what he's done for Washington. We've had him on the podcast. That's why I'm long overdue getting you on the podcast. But thanks for sharing that about the NEDC. Let me ask you about your attendance at the recent conference. Well, I say recent conference. By the time this airs, it'll be almost a year. It was last year's conference in Orlando. We had the COVID, obviously everybody knows. Then we had Denver with the mask, but then we went to Nashville, which was the biggest one ever. And then last year, Orlando, the second biggest one ever, even though we had that nice little tropical storm that came in. So
Yeah.
share your thoughts and opinions and what a great conference that was. And let's encourage some more people to attend in Austin.
Yeah, I told this vendor that I was speaking with yesterday, I think Austin's going to set a record. I just have a feeling the location's phenomenal. I don't know that the NIAAA has been in Austin. I know they've been in
No, they haven't.
times. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then I'm looking forward to Tampa the year after that. That'll be great. But I look for, oh gosh, I don't know. I'm not on the NIAAA board, but I think we're going to have just under 3,000 people in attendance. And I know the hotels and all that can handle it. I know many of them are booked out as we speak. So it's going to be interesting to get a spot in there. But I think, the agenda looks phenomenal. We're teaching some 60 plus LTC courses. I don't know if that's ever happened. That program continues to grow. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that and bringing that back here to our state for two reasons. One, I always like to bring stuff back to the OADA. We're taking, many of our board will be in attendance, and I think we may have somewhere around 40 to 50 ADs that'll be attending. So really looking forward to that. But the other reason is I just took a part-time gig, kind of unretired here in our Bend school district as the district AD. So it'll be interesting to be able to bring some things back for our local school district.
Yeah, let's talk. I was going to ask you about that. Let's talk about how I wouldn't say recently retired, but someone who's the executive director up in Oregon, life's good, and all of a sudden they say, "Hey, we need you back there. We need you to unretire." So how did that happen?
Well, we had a situation in our local district where they needed a little bit of help policy wise. We had a district AD. In fact, I got a phone call when I was at the NEDC this last July in Hawaii from the district. And I said, well, let's talk when we get back. But this person then, who was one of our local ADs and also serving as the district AD, ended up taking a principal position here in Central Oregon. So then they said, well, we may need you to do a little more than tweak some policy. And so I said, sure, I can do that as a part-time thing. And really what's fun for me is not necessarily the late nights and setting up for games, as you know, that takes its toll, but also mentoring. We have in our 4 big high schools here in Bend, we have 2 new ADs. And so I really look at my role is to support them at our district office level and, provide anything that they need. They're all accomplished folks, athletic administrators, even though a couple of them are new, they are accomplished in the field of athletics. They're going to do great. I just want to be able to support them as best I can and mentor them. We have about a 20% turnover of ADs here in the state of Oregon this last year. And so, and part of that number is ADs who've switched schools. So it wasn't all just newbies, but we have a really solid mentorship program. We brought in Tim Burke. His brother Dennis had done it the previous several years. So he's our mentor coordinator and is doing a great job offering support and connecting new ADs with a mentor. So yeah, I think that's how I see my role with the school district. But I intend to bring back as much as I can from that conference to help the folks here.
Let me ask you this two-part question. What's the favorite part of your job? So the two parts are, what's the favorite part of your job now as the executive director in Oregon? And what's the favorite part of your job when you were an active AD?
Well,
Or are they the same?
they're similar. I got into education to work with kids, and that's what I enjoyed more than anything else. And when you lose sight of that, then you need to really question what you're doing. So when I switched roles from coaching, and early on I was coaching and AD at the same time, but that transitioned, and so you're just an athletic administrator. So really, who you're coaching is you're coaching your coaches. And looking back, I think there's many things I could have done a better job of, but I also am proud of setting the stage and beginning to build the culture where I was. And now that transition has changed from one high school to an entire district to now the state. And so I really feel fortunate to be able to lead an organization that is so full of servant leaders and so full of people that are growing themselves. And I bring up Tim Sam again. He has begun a program where he's nudging all of our ADs. He tracks all 300 ADs, and he knows which classes they've taken, how close they are to getting an RAA or a CAA or a CMAA. And those nudges have resulted in record numbers of folks sitting down for the CAA exam. So we are getting this flywheel moving, and I'm really proud of associations with folks like that. And you've had on your podcast before, I think, Shelley Moore. She's our president-elect, and she's planning our conference. And she's also on the national NIAAA DEIB committee. So I'm really excited to see where she takes this conference this next April.
Let's finish up with a couple of questions I always ask when I've got people on. The first one is, I need two suggestions from you for a brand new AD, and they need to follow Hoodie's suggestions in order to become a success. What would your two suggestions be?
Number one, get out of the office. Get out of the office. It's so easy to get pinned, behind your computer and on the phone. But really, it is about making connections with your staff, with your coaches, with your athletes. So get out and really realize why you got into it, which for most people, it's being around kids and people. It's a relationship business. And then I guess the second thing is be available and be a listener. My tendency is to try to solve problems, and my wife would laugh because we talk about things and then I try to come up with a solution. But really, being a listener and a sympathetic ear works with not only parents but also your coaching staff. Those would be two things.
Well said. We'll finish with this. Hoodie, what question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
Oh boy, I don't know. You did a pretty good job. Maybe some sort of crystal ball question. By the time this airs, we'll know who was able to, how the Ducks did in the Big Ten.
Oh, there you go.
They're just now starting into that whole league. But yeah, so.
Well, let me ask you, because obviously everyone, and you'll find this funny. So you remember when I used to coach the professional women's football team here in Utah 6-7 years ago, and we played the Oregon team once, and we played up in Eugene. But of course, I made the mistake because I said, well, yes, we're playing at Willamette High School. And of course, everyone says, no, it's Willamette. And they made a point to point that out to me. But Oregon fans are really behind their team. And so what does the state, both East and West, feel about their move to the Big
I don't
Ten?
know. Yeah, I think universally, whether you're an Oregon State Beaver fan or an Oregon Duck fan, I feel like folks are very disappointed in the leadership of the Pac-12 and how that whole demise came about.
Don't
I
get me started on that. You are exactly right.
I understand the issues, the media issues and the money issues. I think we, I don't want to get too much into personal things, but I really think we need some leadership at the NCAA level. I'm concerned about where we are with NIL, and of course, we're dealing with that here at the high school level now. I'm concerned where we are with the lack of loyalty with the transfer portal. I think there's some things that need to be cleaned up there. But in terms of Oregon, I think universally people were very disappointed to see this old league meet its demise. Now they're rebuilding, and that's great. I totally support what they're doing with that. But yeah, that was definitely not good. I don't know that we're going to see Oregon stay in the Big Ten. But I do think football, I think football is sort of its own baby, and maybe that should have happened early and taken care of, and then we could have kept things how it was. But be it as it may, we gotta deal with it, and we gotta continue to grow with it. So it's kind of fun.
And again, this is totally off the subject of what we've been talking about, but it just going along with what you said, talk about poor leadership in the Pac-12. Obviously, Texas and Oklahoma leave the Big 12 that only had 10 teams, but they were numerically challenged. The Pac-12 had a chance to pick up those 8 teams, which are now the Big 12 in addition to everybody else they gathered. And they just said, oh, no, we're the Pac-12. We're too good for you. And now look what's happened to the conference.
Yeah, you could look at a number of critical decisions, and it's always easy to go back in hindsight and sort of forensically pick it apart. But yeah, I mean, we all have our opinions. It's just interesting today. I mean, you talked earlier about where are we with high school athletics, and we continue to be media driven as well. And I think there's nothing better than education-based athletics. I really come back to that and how important that is when you look at youth sports and how that whole industry is as big or bigger than the NFL. That could lead to some problems. And so I think we have a unique model with education-based athletics that I would really like to see us continue to champion and, develop and make the best that we can.
That is well said. On that note, that wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our special guest today has been David Hood, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, the Executive Director of the Oregon Athletic Directors Association. Hoodie, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.